Hi everyone, this is Connie and Caleb. Welcome to the prototyping lecture series for Sling Health. In this presentation, Connie and I will hopefully give you a few tips that may be beneficial as you all begin and continue to prototype. One of the first things your team should do is come up with a list of user needs. These user needs are a list of criteria that will help you make sure that your end product does what it is intended to. You as a team can often refer back to this list to ensure that your device does not go too far from the goal. This, of course, does not mean that your ideas can't change, but is simply a tool to help keep your goal in mind. These criteria do not have to be quantifiable, for these user needs will actually help you come up with your design inputs, which are quantifiable. For example, a user need may be that the hospital beds must be able to comfortably fit most adults, or a corresponding design input would be that the hospital bed must extend 7 to 10 feet in length. Both user needs and design inputs are important things to look at as you all continue to iterate on your device. Some questions you may want to ask as you develop your user needs includes who will use the device, how will the end user utilize the product, or what is the purpose for this device. Going back to the importance of user needs and design inputs, for each design iteration, you all would want to both verify and validate your design. For design verification, which corresponds to your quantifiable design inputs, the main question you are asking is if I made the product right. On the other hand, for design validation, which corresponds to your user needs, the main question you are asking is if I made the right product. While the questions look very similar, they are vastly different. Both verifying and validating your prototype during each iteration will help keep you on path to achieving your end goal. There are a few types of prototypes that may be beneficial depending on what kind of project you are working on. The first one would be a wireframe, in which the prototype is simply something that is quote unquote thrown together. This kind of prototype is made out of any material to just give you all as designers a physical feel to how this device should work. The second type of prototype would be a mock-up, which is just a detailed drawing. While not giving much input to the actual design process, this kind of prototype is very helpful for initial stages of idea generation and explanation to colleagues. The last kind is a rapid prototype. This kind of prototype is a step up from a mockup by being more interactive. Tools like SOLIDWORKS or any other CAD software can be used to build and theoretically test your device. A good way to choose a direction for what you want your first prototype to take would be through a pew matrix. Let's say some of your team members came up with a few mockup drawings. Instead of just voting on the favorite, a pew matrix can be used to determine the best course of action. So here's how you actually use this matrix. The first thing you would put are your user needs. You would then add weightings to the user needs based on how important each one is. Then looking at the different options, you as a team would then decide if the mockup drawing met the user needs, a plus, did not meet the user needs, a zero, or actually hindered the user needs, a minus. A final score can be calculated for each option by either adding, not adding, or subtracting the different weights. In the end, this of course does not mean that you have to go with a certain option. One thing that may even be better than just choosing an option would be taking different parts of your different options to come up with another mockup that is more successful at meeting all the user needs.
Okay, great. Thank you, Caleb. So now we're going to be moving on into the prototyping development strategies of the presentation. So this is a really important aspect of the process to learn about when it comes to actually creating either models of your prototype or physically creating your actual prototype. So I think the best resource that um, the undergrads on your team, especially the engineering students, the best resource that you will have access to is the Zachary labs. And I know that access to the labs, it might be difficult to get access to them due to COVID restrictions. I know last semester it was pretty difficult to get access to the labs, but they are still a really great resource for this if you do have access to them, because you'll have access to things like to different design softwares like CAD or 3D printing, which will be really helpful in creating a physical, tangible kind of product. Um, And also for this process, you will likely need to really rely on the collective engineering experience that is present on your team. And also note that not all clinical problems will require a physical prototype to be addressed and to be solved. So definitely go with what is best for solving your specific problem. Okay, so once you actually have a physical model of your prototype, or even your actual prototype, or even just an idea of a design, a really good way to assess and evaluate whether or not your design will work well in the situation that it needs to work well in. A good way to evaluate that is um, to study the existing technology and medical devices that will be used in conjunction with your product. And this is something that like might seem um, a little bit weird at first, but a really, really good way to get your hands on these medical devices is to actually purchase expired equipment online. Um, so these listings are usually heavily discounted because they are expired and they can't be used on patients in a clinical setting. So they are sold to be used in a non-clinical setting. Um, and I have some websites up here where you can go and search really quickly, and also a quick Google search of even like expired balloon catheter or something can probably bring up a couple listings. So yeah, that's a really good way for it's also a really good way for visualizing like the required dimensions and functionality of your device. Moving on to probably the most important thing about building a startup and creating a business is the funding opportunities that you get, because this is really what will fuel your product in the future. So one source of funding is through Sling. Sling will provide at least $200 to each team in the form of refunds. So what this means is that while Sling will not directly provide these funds to any teams, if you or your teammate spends up to $200, they can be refunded through SoftC, which is A&M's financial system for student organizations. So definitely take advantage of this opportunity that Sling provides to y'all, because I think once teams finish through Sling, if you guys choose to keep going past this year, you lose this opportunity. So definitely take advantage of it while it's still here. And another potential source of funding is through outside grants and competitions. You will likely hear about these opportunities through your email. And also if any leadership board members find any opportunities like this, it will definitely be announced in the general Slack channel. Just like a link will be sent to y'all to check out if y'all are interested in that. So definitely these third-party like ventures, these outside ventures are a really, really great opportunity, not only to obtain funds, but also to gain exposure, because um, typically an article will be written about the teams that win these opportunities and win these competitions or grants. And so that's a really, really great way to gain early exposure to professionals who keep up with these ventures. So lastly, another source of funding is through faculty mentors to your team. Um, and this is not guaranteed. It really depends on your team's relationship with the mentor. So I would never directly ask mentors for funding, because their primary goal, their primary role in Sling is to help mentor teams, obviously. Their role is not to primarily, their role is not to fund teams. I'm only including mentors in this section because they might choose to offer support to your team if they personally believe in your idea, but of course that's not a requirement of their job. So definitely please don't ask the mentors um, for funds. But I just thought to include them because if you cultivate a good relationship with your mentor, it is another possible source of funding. So now that we've kind of touched on the basic prototyping process and what is important when it comes to creating a prototype, I just want to touch on um, why your prototype is important in regards to Sling. And basically, the short answer is that it really isn't. While we are encouraging all teams to get as close to a working prototype as they can, creating that physical prototype isn't really a hard requirement for teams to be successful in the context of Sling. So even if your team encounters difficulties and you don't end up with a physical prototype, the important thing to focus on is what new experiences or expertise you gained by going through this process. And um, ultimately, the goal is for your team to continue on past Sling and find ways to be successful beyond Sling. So that's really the end goal here. The purpose of us pushing y'all to create that prototype is really to gain experience. And if you end up with something physical and tangible at the end, that is absolutely wonderful. That is the best case scenario. But it's also understandable that creating that physical prototype and a prototype that actually works is a really, really difficult process, especially since all of our members are busy with other obligations like school and studying and maybe even other jobs. So um, just keep in mind that this is a learning process, and that's really the ultimate goal that we want y'all to take away from this experience. Alright, so my last tip for y'all is to ask for help. Definitely seek feedback on your prototypes and designs from mentors. Don't be shy. Don't be shy to send them an email or reach out to them with any questions about this process because they're really here to help. And of course, um, keeping keeping them updated on your progress and keeping them in the loop with your team will definitely um, help you to create a lasting relationship with this mentor past Link, which is really, really important. So that is all we had for you guys in terms of the prototyping lecture series. Thank you for watching to the end. And obviously this was pre-recorded, so we won't be here to actually answer your questions in real time. But if you do have any questions or you would like some clarifications on some of the things we touched on in this lecture series, then don't be shy to send either me or Caleb a message in the Slack. And yeah, thanks. And best of luck on your prototyping and best of luck to your teams.